What's up, everyone? This is fun, right? A nice little change of pace from where we were so much of the first half of the year anyway. The second half, we are off and running. I don't mean the proverbial second half of the NBA season. I mean the real second half. Over the last few weeks, month, it has been great to be a Celtics fan. We welcome you into Celtics Beat. Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti back with us. And of course, Abby Chin, who it's been too long, quite frankly, since we've had Abby on the show. So we wanted to rectify that immediately. How are you?
I'm well. I'm a little tired. Flew in late to Detroit, not to date us. Happy to be here and happy to be talking about the team that has the best record in the NBA since the new year. So
that's right.
Hang on a minute. Are you tired from I don't know if this is how Arena works. I don't know this, but I saw it on your Instagram story last night. They have like a DJ on the floor during shoot around. The DJ booth comes out a little bit. Does that come out after games too, or is there a party on the floor afterwards? I'm just curious.
I mean, every arena is different, but yes, Brooklyn plays up the party. Atlanta does that too, but I feel like I'm not sure their DJ's on the floor. Philly has a DJ. He's up and on a stage and things like that. So every arena is different. Huge fan of the Nets at the moment. The Nets PR team, I should say.
So, do you have a favorite? Well, I guess we'll remove Boston from the equation because it's the home arena. Do you have a favorite place to visit? Not the city, but obviously to go cover games, to actually go to the arena for all the ambiance of it all.
It's been a while since I did the West Coast because of the pandemic.
Sure.
But I would say where the Warriors are playing is always fun, even if it's the new Chase Center or even when it was in Oakland. It is loud. Those arenas are small and compact, and it feels like the fans are right on top of you. And of course, you get to watch one of the best teams, one of the best players in the NBA. And then Philly is fun only because they're so angry. I had forgotten about it. We were just there last week. And, when they announced the Celtics lineups, a lot of vitriol for Al Horford, who, did nothing wrong himself. I mean, he took the bag.
Yeah, he stole all that money.
Asked to do for that team. It was a bad fit. And that's not on him. That's on, the decision makers who decided to pay him all that money. And then he kindly left and gladly took an assignment in Oklahoma City. So I don't know why they're so angry at Al Horford. But Philly is a fun place. Everywhere, I will say, in my get off my lawn moment is getting louder and louder and louder. Even the Garden, it's so loud in there. So a little inside basketball, we go because I get to travel with the team, which is wonderful. We usually fly the night of. And so last night, flying out of New York, you got to fly out of Newark. So that's a trek out of the city. And then we had to de-ice because of the weather. And then flying into Detroit, which was not a short flight for us. So yes, I didn't get in until 4:00 in the morning.
You pinpoint for you the get off my lawn moment. What is it like? Does it come with age? Does it come with now being a parent, obviously? What was the transition to where it's a little loud in this arena?
I think I notice it a lot more, I know, in the games that we don't have, because I usually have my IFB in. So I have something in my ears, and I have the dulcet tones of Mike Gorman in my head, usually all night, which is a lovely distraction. And there were a lot of Celtics fans inside the Barclays Center. And whether it's silly stuff like nice rebound, Peyton Pritchard, or ooh, what was that pass? But there was a lot of Celtics fans in there. And so I don't know when that moment flipped for me though, Adam. I really think that the volume has been turned up in arenas, and that is just an overall decibel level has changed. Yeah. I don't think it's my ears. I think that things have ratcheted up to a whole other level.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I bet, you wouldn't be able to relate to this because nobody was at games during the real heart of the pandemic, but I bet it feels, especially for players, I bet it feels so much louder than it did before, because it was always something they were used to, the music, the whatever sideshow stuff, obviously fans, coaches, teammates, everything. It all just sort of, it was that ambient, just kind of almost white noise-esque, it blended together. But then between the bubble and then going back to home arenas, or even traveling but without fans in the stands, then it's just music and it's just super quiet. And then once you get the fans back in, they're probably all ratcheted up after 2 years of being away. I bet it is louder. I bet the whole experience of going to a game is just a whole louder deal.
So you think maybe my ears got trained to deal with the quiet, and now they're just
Yeah,
being insulted once again, and
that's a
I've got
much
to
better
adjust.
way of saying it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know. It feels loud. I can feel it in my bones.
I just don't want you going all Clint Eastwood sitting on the porch telling people to get off your lawn.
It is kind of a weird balance because I feel like with the pandemic, there's a lot more that I'm trying not to take anything for granted, and so I'm trying not to get upset about the small things. But then last night, walking out of the plane into the cold, I was like, oh, at 3:30 in the morning, this is brutal. We had a 25-minute bus ride. Oh. So, my first world problems are. I'm trying to stay present.
It's okay. And you're in my, well, I was going to call it home away from home, but it's really not that. But I lived outside Detroit for about a year. So, you're luckier you're passing through.
We're both in snowstorms though. So
that's
I'm
true.
Trying to remind my husband who's home alone with the 2 kids that I'm dealing with some snow too.
Yeah, and on your way to the hotel spa, and maybe I'll get a massage while I'm here. Make sure you feed the kids, get them a nap. It'd be great. Let's turn up the heat for everybody out there listening or watching, and talk about all that is going well for this team. Just to kind of reset for anyone that is unaware. So the Celtics, they've won 10 out of 11. They're 17-5 going back to January 8th. Picked up during this span, they've picked up 10.5 games on the Nets, which is ridiculous. There's a game and a half back at third place. 2 games left, obviously, on the trip, as we mentioned. You're in Detroit, the game on Saturday, in Indiana on Sunday. So it's a quick little back-to-back before returning home. And
the game at noon on Saturday, by the way. I just learned.
Yeah, that's not so great. How do you expect the team to respond on the, are there any, we heard David Pasternak the other day when he had 2 or 3 goals talking about how, he loves early games. Is there anyone on the Celtics that just gets up for an afternoon game?
Not that I know of. I remember the former Celtic Dennis Schroeder, the last matinee the Celtics had, I asked him how difficult it is to switch up his routine, and he said, I had to wake up, I set the alarm for 8 a.m. this morning. That's rough. And so, us parents, 8 a.m. is not necessarily, yeah.
When I rattle off all those numbers about and there are a zillion more numbers I could give you that I have here. I mean, Grandy's been tweeting them out like crazy, obviously, with the turnaround for this team, or B-Rob's got a great one about the net rating of the starting 5 and all of that. They've been great. They've been great. I don't need to tell you. I mean, we had you on earlier this yeyear, and you're much closer.
Before they were great. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you're much closer to this team than we are. You're at these games. You're at, to all the media availabilities. You're obviously, if you're not there, you're in studio. You're paying attention to every walk of life, every detail that surrounds this team. Earlier this year, Abby, I mean, it felt like a job to watch this team. Lighter is everything around the team right now when they're playing like this versus what it was that first half of the year.
You're absolutely right. It is night and day from covering this team. And I think that, and I feel like I said this to you guys, we take for granted how much change there was for the Celtics. When you think about not just the entire coaching staff, but also the front office pieces, and then the pieces inside the locker room. While I know the core is still there and there are familiar faces and Al Horford returning, it was everything with the organization changed over the summer. And so getting used to that, I think, took some time. I think even the coaches and the players underestimated what a steep learning curve it was going to be. And everyone has taken time to adjust. I want to believe I am in the Jaylen Brown camp where I never lost doubt. I saw it every day. But I honestly can't say that. And you're right. It was a tough slog there for a while. It's very different. When I was in studio all of last season and I was not around the team at all, you get sucked into that negativity of social media and people are just angry and don't see a way out. And when you're with the team every day, they are focused on solutions and focused on the next play, making the next right decision. And so it's not so much of the doom and gloom. And so this season, early on, I wasn't as, beat down as I feel like I was last year with everything that was going on. And now it is, it's night and day. It's so fun. Everyone is so happy. we're talking about these national games because there's been a lot of them lately. I need to get a one-on-one pregame for our pregame show. And anyone we ask, like, yeah, sure, no problem. When they're losing, that is a completely different story. So everybody's in a good mood. Everybody's happy.
In talking about interviews, like we've had, Randy's been on, Max has been on, and obviously you're a perfect person to ask this as well. Ime Udoka is certainly, I think, viewed by fans as kind of having a gruffer exterior, and I think, like, again, Grandy Gorman, they've both talked about the fact that even when they're doing their interviews with him, he's all business. There's not a lot of obviously, like, he's a very nice guy, I'm sure, and I'm sure there's plenty of personality, but it doesn't really come out when he's laser focused, he's game focused.
I think that he does. What do you mean by gruffer? To me,
Like,
that's not the word I would use to describe him.
I guess I just like, I don't know. There's kind of like a bulldog sort of thing about him versus, but like Brad certainly could be all business as well and not necessarily be, jovial if he wasn't in the mood for it. But it still didn't, I don't know. He didn't seem sort of as tough, for lack of a better way of putting it. I don't know. Does that make sense? It's okay if it doesn't. I mean, I'm viewing this as an outsider, obviously.
Number one, I would say he always has to wear a mask when he's on camera, and anytime that he's talking to us, so we don't see him smile. Yeah. Brad used to crack, his deadpan jokes and then look over at you and be like, "Did you guys get that? That was a joke. That was a joke, right?" And two, one other major difference from Brad is that he is a former player. And while they are both so X's and O's focused and so live and breathe basketball, I feel like they just come at it from different perspectives, obviously, from a player and a coach. And so those conversations are differently, and the way that they deal with people is differently, and the way that they speak about the game is different. And I think that the Celtics are benefiting from that now, obviously, and those relationships that he has built with the players and the way that he communicates with them. It's clear, right, with the changes that we've seen in this team, and how Ime talked early season about habits, and he reiterated that last night when he talks about bad habits, he meant offensively, and that is arguing for foul calls and letting that consume you when you're on the floor, not moving the ball, devolving into iso ball so often, and that those are habits that are taking time, but that he has been able to break. I do feel like there are moments where I have gotten to see his personality come through. One, I would urge everyone to listen to, I know we're on a podcast, this may be a rival, but I am also on the View from the Rafters, behind the scenes with the Boston Celtics.
Yes.
And the episode this week talks with Ime and a number of the staff members about their roots in the Pacific Northwest. And I think that is a really good glimpse into Ime and where he comes from, who he is, and how he has gotten to where he is now, and to hear his viewpoint. And then too, and I'll tell this story, you mentioned it, how badly the season started, and the Celtics just got demolished at home, the 2 games at TD Garden. And the second one, he rolled up and I said, "Ime, we have got to stop meeting like this." Because I talked to him after every home game, win or lose. And he just is like, "I know, something's got to change." But he wasn't mad. He wasn't angry. Yeah. He wasn't even frustrated at that point. He was just like, "You're right. This is not good. I'm going to work to fix it." And so, he's not, I wouldn't call him.
Which is good. Because there are definitely some coaches I've worked with in the past that would not have laughed at that.
Right. Yeah. So he did not, give me any weird sort of side eye either. And so there is personality there. I do think, and I think it took us time to get there with Brad as well. A lot of people, Brad's first season was my first season. And I can tell you, even I think, a handful of years in, that post-game interview with Brad in the hallway at home, like that was still one of the few parts of my job that stressed me out, because I just didn't know what kind of mood or reaction he was going to be in. And so I don't necessarily feel that with Ime. And I appreciate that, actually.
I think, there's the sentiment that we all owe Ime an apology for overreacting to early season troubles. And, some people, No, I think you do. I think a lot of us do. I think
I think the people who called for him.
Nobody in this podcast. Trust me.
But that's what I mean. Like, I
here.
think anyone out there that listened that was like, Ime's got to be fired. This guy's like, those people owe an apology. But I think any of us that were skeptical along the way and called out some of the learning, curves and flaws, like, I'm not apologizing for that. I think that was justified.
But like at the same time, don't we also have to let him like learn on the job and like because he's a first year head coach, I've done this before, make mistakes? Like
sure, I guess the question was whether they should have hired a first year coach, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well,
I also think it's not necessarily that. I think that Ime has had the long term in view the whole time. I mean, I wouldn't say question. We all said when he was running only switching defense during the preseason, we're like, what is going on? But it was, the players have muscle memory of playing a certain way and have played, especially for the Celtics, a certain defensive system for, their entire careers. So switching that is going to take time, figuring out what that looks like, what that means for you, what your job is, and what your role is in this new system is different. And that is not something that is going to change overnight. And so I give credit to Ime for implementing that and then not backing down when it didn't work or when they were struggling and guys were confused and couldn't figure it out. I mean, he stuck with it, and you continue to drive home the points of emphasis, and clearly they're sinking in.
Yeah.
And that's what excites me is I feel like that's kind of, we're at a new baseline now. And so it's going to get better. And then we can start looking ahead to changing expectations.
Well, and as I whisper into the mic, they also weeded out the guys that couldn't really do it. Like they've got the right personnel to fit everything that you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's all the habits that they used to drive us crazy offensively have been really fixed. And that's been the biggest, I think, to me. I mean, the defense has been otherworldly for the past 2 months. I mean, it's comical. You look at and Sean Grandy said it best last night. It's like, I know it sounds like far-fetched to say that they're lapping the competition. The Celtics defensively at this point are just lapping the competition. And what's great is, again, you kind of saw this a little bit in 2021 towards the end. It's like, there's something here. And then in 2022, the calendar flipped, and it's been just like lockdown defense every single night. It's been wonderful, with the exception of the Pistons loss. But the Pistons actually just hit a bunch of really tough shots in that game. So, kudos to them. But the thing that I think with Ime that a lot of people were annoyed with in terms of just their offensive, they were so stagnant at certain points. And you would hear about, we want to preach ball movement, but it actually never happened. Now, as we hit 2022, when you look at some of the highlight plays from last night, I think the best one is one where I think Jalen cuts Tatum to the ball at top of the key. Tatum throws a bounce pass between two guys. Jalen catches it and then bounces inside to Al, who finishes it for the layup. Yeah, all of that is stuff that we definitely didn't see at all, and now we're seeing with more consistency, the past couple of years. And this is where I think when we step back and look at the biggest differences in Boston, obviously their defense is ridiculous, but they were sort of expected to be a really good defensive team right from the jump. I think when you look at everything, this new offensive approach that they have, where the ball's flying around, again, credit to the guys on the floor too, no question. I mean, Marcus Smart obviously being a part of this is huge as a ball mover. Tatum's been, his growth as a passer and facilitator has been documented throughout the entire season. They have the right mix for this, but like the fact that it's actually coming to fruition and the basketball that everybody's been craving for the past couple of years is actually happening. Again, I just think it's a credit to Ime for sticking to his guns, as Abby said, and being not hard-headed, but like being like, just wait this out. We're going to get this right. And now that we're seeing it, it's like, again, they're blowing everybody out by 20 points every single night. And my question to Abby, I think at this point is this team, how do we look at this team and actually evaluate what's going on? Because on the one hand, they're blowing everybody out. This is amazing. But on the other hand, like, they're catching everybody at the right time. Like Brooklyn without everybody is a great example.
Multiple times.
The Sixers without James Harden and Seth Curry and all that stuff. That's another, like, how do we properly evaluate what we're seeing in front of us? Because it's amazing. It's awesome. It looks like a top-end team. But on the flip side, you have to evaluate the competition that they're playing.
To harken back to Brad Stevens once again, you can only play the schedule that's in front of you. So
Yeah.
I think that they are But the positives are these are things that they were not doing earlier in the season. They lost to a depleted Detroit team earlier this season. And last year, how many times did that happen where they go in and then they let their foot off the gas? They did that earlier this season against the Clippers when they found out that Paul George wasn't playing and they didn't have Kawhi. And so they didn't come out. And then Brandon Boston rolled over them in Los Angeles. And so I am choosing to look at the positive and that those kinds of things are no longer happening. And then I am hoping that they take these fundamental changes, see how they're playing, see how it works, what they can do with that, and be able to fall back on what they have built to this point when it does come to the playoffs and when their backs are up against the wall. And so I think there's only good that can come from this. And let's be honest, they did need to build some confidence after the way this season started, after the way last year started, how much criticism the Jays have taken. I think regardless of who the competition is, the fact that they are steamrolling everybody is a good thing.
It's easy to look at a few week sample and that's a lot better than a couple game sample, obviously, but we still have full year and the last couple of years of sort of the, I don't know, like COVID fears and injury histories and all, like it can all fall apart. Like tell me Celtics fans didn't gasp at the very least when Jaylen Brown went down on his wrist, last night, and it was like, it's all over, it's falling apart. And I know you asked him post game and he said he's fine, but it always sort of after the last couple of years feels like they're just
Smart with his ankle, and then
right.
Williams with the calf. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's, it's just that, like that one awful moment away to a key player. And it's not like the Celtics have been immune to that. So, can you, throwing out betting odds and 538 and all of it, can you look at it with what you're seeing on a daily basis now and say, yeah, I mean, I can see this team as a title contender? Because I'll be honest, I'm not there yet.
I am buying in. I don't know if I'd go so far to say that I believe they are contending for a title this season, only because of the unknowns in the Eastern Conference, in that the Brooklyn Nets, with the addition of Ben Simmons and a healthy KD and Kyrie being able to play in home games, or the Sixers with James Harden and Joel Embiid possibly figuring that out. To me, and then you also always have Miami and Giannis lurking there. So those are the things that give me pause. But when it comes to this team, and the thing that I keep falling back on, for me, is with Jaylen and Jayson. I know it's so long ago, but I go back to that 2017 season, which was changing for those two in so many ways. But in that, I just remember going through that playoff run and saying, I will never doubt these two. I feel like these two, wherever they are, they're going to figure it out if you give them the right tools to do that. And I am so excited to see what they do with this opportunity. So I am absolutely buying in on this roster, how well they're fitting the addition of Derek White. I think I literally, when I heard the trade in the car, I was like, yes, Brad, this is awesome. I don't care that they gave away the fact that you got a guy who came up in that Spurs system, makes quick decisions and is unselfish. That is what the Celtics have been asking for all season long. And so I am buying in. I am excited, much more excited about this team than I have been all season. And I am hopefully optimistic for a lengthy playoff run.
It is one thing that, because I'm sure you guys see this in your mentions and you hear it on sports talk radio of some of the lesser competition they've beat during this run. Of course, the JV Nets, like Evan said, missing everyone. There's no Kyrie, there's no Durant, there's no.
They Detroit 4 times in 22 days, whatever.
And had better beat them, obviously, this time around. But, I think it's the bigger stuff. And we've sort of highlighted all of this, but just to kind of recap it, I think the bigger stuff is not necessarily who you're beating or by how much, but how you're doing it. And, looking at what we just using last night as a sample in Brooklyn, sensational ball movement, league best dominant defense, obviously, all the switching that we've talked about, the, balanced offensive contributions, knocking down open looks, hitting their shots in general, capitalizing at the free throw line. Like these are things that are trends.
Getting to the free throw line.
Getting to the free throw line. Absolutely. Like these are things that they are just doing right. They are doing the right things, which, to your point before, Abby, they were not doing earlier this year, which just makes such a difference, regardless of who you're playing, which is what gives you a shot, to beat the Denvers of the world and Philly when it is at full strength and Brooklyn and so on and so forth. Milwaukee, obviously.
And I think that Ime said this last night with the defense, the way that it's playing right now, and with the mental focus that this team has. And that's the way I feel like they have described it, is that they are going into every game with a different level of mental focus. Knowing your personnel is something Ime has said all season. If you hear him say KYP, that's what he's saying.
Mhm.
But he is going into every game confident that they can win if they follow the game plan. And that is a big thing. That's a huge thing. And I think that when he says that, he means any team. So yes, they go into Milwaukee and they're going to have to face Giannis and Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton. He feels confident that they will be able to compete against these high level teams. And I know that we have yet to see it, but I am really excited for those matchups.
Since being down 2-0 6 road games ago. I mean, that's outrageous. That is unbelievable.
I know last night when they didn't go up 28-2 against the Nets, it was a little disappointing.
That was the funniest game I've seen in a long time, because it was just, and again, I've never seen a game be over in like 3 minutes, but that game was over in 3 minutes. And it was just like, okay, we're going to play this whole thing out. Hopefully nobody gets hurt. Like Jalen, coming up a little bit with the injury last night was like, we didn't need this in the fourth quarter or third quarter of blowout here in Brooklyn. Like didn't need to happen. So luckily he's okay. But it's this team, when you look at in the playoffs, like what wins.
Wait, Evan, sorry, back to my first world problems. Don't lose your train of thought.
Yeah.
But when I'm sitting courtside in Barclays, the score, the main jumbotron is so high, and then they only have scores on the outside. So I rarely actually know the score unless and they were both national games, so I don't have Mike Gorman in my ear telling me things. For that 28-2 run, I'm like, this feels pretty crazy. I looked up and I think it was 25-2, and I was like, what in the world? Like, how did we get here? And then it just kept going. Maybe it was like 20-2 or something, but yeah. Okay, sorry.
That's not on you. That's a design flaw. You should be able to see the score from anywhere inside an arena.
That's a humble brag. Yeah, my courtside seat, I could not see the score.
Unless you're a really bad team. Like if you're a really bad, like the Kings should have the score nowhere visible in any arena. Just don't have
to check your phone.
Who cares? You're here anyway.
The best thing that Cleveland does is they put a plus minus between the two scores on their scoreboard. So, whenever I come back at a break and I have to say Celtics up 15, Celtics down 9, I never have to do the math by myself. It's always right there.
Ah, there you go.
That's huge. That's
huge for me.
It's like when like in the football booth, when the guys know exactly how far the punt went. I'm like, how do you guys? But it's the spotter next to him who's like, this is how far it went right here. It's just a number.
What's your number?
But in the playoffs, like what gives me a little bit of hope here for the playoffs, and obviously it's every series is its own animal. It's different depending on the matchups, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I like about this team defensively, you see a lot of switching in the playoffs, and Boston has the best switching defense right now in the league. And as I've talked about a couple of times in my Twitter timeline, the Seas the past 2 months are holding people to like under 40% from the field, which is pretty insane. Right now, their season average is hovering around 43% as their opponent's field goal percentage, which is the same as the 04 Pistons. So if people want to keep that in mind, that their defense is as good as one of the best defenses we've ever seen in the entire history of the NBA, which is really great. But the one thing I also want to point out is like things slow down considerably in the playoffs in the half court. And like this half court defense is suffocating. And they are able to affect so many different, ways a team can score. And the one thing I like about this team is how when the ball gets into the paint, it seems like everybody kind of knows where the ball is and where their man is at the same time, and is able to somehow find a way to either get a fingertip or a hand or both hands of the basketball and turn their defense into easy, quick strike offense. And when every possession matters in the playoffs, stuff like that's going to really become a huge issue. And if Boston's getting out in transition and scoring 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 points a game in transition, and then get to the free throw line because, teams are following Jayson Tatum or Jaylen Brown on the way to the basket, life's going to be a lot easier for them. And again, everything's going to be matchup dependent, especially this year because the Eastern Conference is such a mess from 1 to 8, and you can add Atlanta towards the bottom. I'm not out on Atlanta yet, considering what we saw last year. But like this team, I am a little bit more optimistic about their playoff chances because they kind of play basketball at the way basketball is played in the playoffs anyway. Like they move the ball on offense, but defensively, like they're just so suffocating in the half court that, like, yeah, they might have off night shooting, but so are you. And good luck trying to figure out how to score against this defense because I don't know if anybody caught Zach Lowe and Scal the other day, but Scal detailed what they're doing with Robert Williams that makes their defense really hum. And him and Zach thought about it, I think, for collectively like a 5-minute period about, is there any way to counter this? And neither of them had an answer for it. Like what they're doing with Rob is basically let him play like free safety, where he's no longer guarding center. He's kind of floating around and doing this like weird hybrid thing where he just kind of floats around and eventually ends up blocking every single weak side shot possible. What they've done with him and the fact that nobody's figured it out yet is pretty remarkable. Now we get to the playoffs and, you'll get a Spoelstra or a Budenholzer or somebody that's really good at X's and O's. Maybe they'll figure it out. But like, I think this half court defense is so legitimate that they'll have, granted the matchup, a legitimate, way to the finals potentially. I mean, I know it's, injuries, all that stuff, but when you slow the game down, it's only going to help this team, in my opinion.
One thing about the switching defense, and Rob has been incredible, and it is without a doubt, I think the thing that has changed the trajectory of this team is they have that versatility with Al Horford. And Ime talked about this yesterday. This was a big topic of conversation in Brooklyn. And it, because of the fact that you have a guy like Al who can guard post players, you do have the luxury of allowing Rob to roam freely. And so, like you guys have been saying, I mean, the Celtics are an injury away. I think Daniel Tice helps that. He does provide some insurance when it comes to the depth at the center position, but like having Al back there is such a luxury. And not only that he can guard the multiple positions, but he's also a quarterback on defense, and he is communicating to everyone what's going on. And I do think that the pace is a huge point of emphasis, and you get that pace by turning teams over in transition and getting out. And so that is something that they will have to continue to do and continue to build upon, especially when it comes to the playoffs. I just, to me, while we have been giving Ime so much credit for having the long view, and it has been something that the players have adjusted to and are continuing to learn and build off of this entire season, my fear is that we get into a playoff series and a team does adjust to Rob Williams being a free safety, and then it takes some time for them to figure out what they want to do. And I think that that's why these games now are so important. And maybe towards the end of the season, Ime can start, tinkering with some things and using those not necessarily as a practice, but going in with different types of game plans to get guys used to doing things a different way.
Before we get out of here in a few minutes, I want to make sure we spend a little more time on Jayson Tatum on the heels, obviously, of All-Star Weekend. And there's so much there. There's so much kind of on that bone to gnaw at as it relates to, him. I think we're really seeing a transition in him right now. And I think that there's a large confluence of reasons for it. Obviously, as we all know, he started off so poorly this year, not necessarily in terms of the overall volume numbers, but shooting the ball. Statistically, he was having the worst start of his career. We knew eventually he was going to kind of find his way. It took a long time, but obviously his shots are starting to fall at this point. And with the results for the team changing in general as well, I think it makes such a huge difference in terms of, his attitude. He's one of those guys that, a lot of the time, if things aren't going well for the team, he'll be at the podium. We all know this. He won't, shut you out, but he doesn't give you a lot, and now obviously with things going so well for him, for the team, for everyone. He's more expansive. The stuff with Grant Williams, obviously, he's lighter. He's more jovial. I think the All-Star weekend makes plays a big role in that. Obviously, fifth time there, third time as an All-Star, second time starting the game. He's this time surrounded by all-time great, Celtics, all-time greats, period. Talked about how important obviously it was to be in that photo with Garnett and with Pierce and with McHale and with Parrish and meeting all these legends and being in that company. He's already declared himself, and he's not wrong in doing this, by the way. I think he's correct, and I like the confidence. Considers himself one of the best players in the league. I think he knows that if he stays healthy, he's on a trajectory to be, in the NBA 100 in 25 years. Like, he knows, what his capability is long term. You've got the deuce factor. I have such a soft spot for that. Like, show me a more visible player's young kid in the NBA. I don't think you can. I think he's really he is like the poster child for it across the league. And just, even like the JJ Redick interview the other day, so open, so forthcoming, so thoughtful on that podcast in a way that he would never be with any of us. Part of it is Reddick's a former player. It's all very relatable, obviously, but I think that's all a very long-winded way of saying, Abby, I think we're really, even at 23, he's not even close to his prime. We're seeing him come into his own in a way that we haven't seen before.
I would push back on earlier in the season that he was more stoic with the media.
Okay.
I would say both he and Jaylen, it was apparent from media day, they understand the responsibility that they are the franchise cornerstones, and they are not shying away from that responsibility. And so even when Jayson was struggling to start the season, he showed up every night post game and answered questions. And while he may not have Jayson, like you say, is not the most eloquent of people, but I remember there was a night, I think it was in Dallas, and they lost by another heartbreaker. I think it was a shot from Luka, and Jayson came in and was as expansive as I have ever seen him. He was clearly heartbroken. He was frustrated by what was going on. It had already been a long season. He was not able to be the player that we all expected him to be and the player that he expects himself to be. But he sat there and he was very thoughtful in his answers. And so to me, I agree with you. There is a different maturation that we have seen from Jayson Tatum when it comes to his handling of the media and his public persona and brand this season. And I agree that All-Star Weekend always gives that a little boost. And but we have seen year after year, second half Jayson Tatum, he takes it to a whole nother level. And then once the playoffs start, there is an even higher level that he can go to, which is what the great players do. And to me, there's no question he has been one of those guys faced with, and Brad says this all the time, with huge challenges this season to take a team on your shoulders without the support. I mean, they do have Al Horford, but it's different that it is them. He is, and I mean, we forget Jaylen missed so much time earlier in the season. He handled it with as much poise and grace as I think that we could expect from him, while also trying to be that guy and not living up to his own expectations. And so I would push back that I think Jayson has been great with the media this season. I think that he has done what he's being asked by this team to be more of a playmaker, to continue to move the ball, to come in and buy in and play hard on the defensive end every single night. And he's working hard to get rid of some of those habits that he had fallen into. And I think that, like where we started with this conversation, it takes time. We all have so much muscle memory and mental barriers that you need to break through. And it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And so I think that there's no question Ime is unlocking another level. I think it was there the whole time. And Jayson is a sponge. Any of the assistants that you talk to about him, you show him things once or twice and he understands what he's trying to do. It's a matter of executing it out on the floor. And so I agree with you in that Jayson had a rough start to the season, but I am really, I think he's blown me away in the last 5 weeks, whatever it is, since the Celtics have been on this run. And I think that he is a key key piece to the success that they're having now.
Yeah,
And
it's like
I can't believe that Abby just pushed back on me on this show. Cut all that out later and just leave the I agree with you part.
well, I just like the way Abby described like the evolution of Tatum throughout the year. I don't know if you guys have seen the meme of like the calendar, and it's like Jayson Tatum. It's a picture of him, and then it has the calendar, and it's like, oh man, is Jayson Tatum not as good as we thought we were? Then it has like the All-Star break. It's like he's heating up, and then the second half of the season part of the calendar is like, oh my god, he's the best player in the league.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly how it goes every single year. It's truly remarkable how much better in like it's funny with Jalen and Jayson. Jalen always adds something every offseason where you're like, oh my goodness, Jalen clearly was working out and clearly working on stuff. And then Tatum like takes the beginning part of the season and tries stuff out or just like gets off to a weird start. And then by mid-season, you're like, oh my goodness, this guy's amazing. And right now, I've been saying it again for the past 2 months. Like if Tatum hits threes at a respectable rate at his career average, the all NBA thing is like a lock for him. But there are nights where he goes 1 for 7, 2 for 8, or 1 for 6, and it just hurts his percentage. But he's been he is amazing at 23 years old to have all of the scoring tricks that he has, plus this playmaking, which was the biggest. The only you could say against Tatum at 22, 20 years, like, oh, he doesn't make his teammates that much better right now. Well, now he's doing that. So what's the next step for him? I can't wait. The only thing I want to mention before we get out of here is, and I'm honestly blown away by this because I think, Boston has maybe one guy in the most improved player award list, and that'll be Rob Williams. I think it's pretty remarkable. But I
brought that up last night. I agree. Why isn't Rob in more conversations?
Well, I could argue that Grant Williams is also, like, if you were to make a Celtics version of this list, I think Grant's incredible. I think what he has turned into this past, couple of months, where he's the most reliable open 3-point shooter on the team, but the defensive stuff where you saw it in college, like, yeah, he'll be able to switch and do all these things. Like now he's going and guarding Joel Embiid and like kind of holding his own against Embiid. And nobody can. It's just a matter of time until he scores. But that last game played against Philly, like he was left alone with Embiid and stood him up and would not let Embiid gain any ground on him. And then he goes from that to guarding a perimeter player and staying in front of them. And I'm sitting here saying, like, yes, I know that Rob is the key to like their defense essentially in terms of how crazy functional it is. But what Grant is doing on the flip side, and I just hope people are starting to pay attention to this, really watch him play. I mean, it is really like the ball doesn't stick. He's a great connector. Like Derek White is a connector of pieces. Grant is a connector. He's a guy that can just make a quick decision, put the ball on the floor a little bit more than he's been able to before. I mean, there are times now where he'll have the ball on the perimeter and put it on the ground and go to the basket and then finish, which I never thought would ever happen in Grant's career. Is starting to happen sort of with regularity now. And so my point being, I just want to take a minute to just salute Grant Williams and the progress he's made this season. I think it is underappreciated how much growth there has been beyond just the 3-point shooting. I think he's been a really amazing rotational player.
I know my good friend Chris Forsberg is the conductor of the Rob Williams hype train, like the president of the fan club. I would like that role for the Grant Williams fan club because I am a
cheers. You can have it.
Of Grant's. Number one, he's really fun to talk to. He is hilarious. He never stops talking and has a great personality. But Evan, so much of what you were just saying, I mean, I go back to summer league and he didn't play on the summer league team. And everyone was like, why doesn't Grant have to play on the summer league team? And it was clear then that Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka had a vision for Grant and wanted him to focus on what that was. And he absolutely took that and is now just excelling at not only his role, but then Evan, like you said, being able to, as he has been so successful in that, open up other parts of his game. And I think that is one of the funny results of last night and calling for the alley-oop is that we are getting to see some of those highlights from Tennessee. I mean, Grant was not just a defensive player at Tennessee. He does have talent. He has offensive game, but he has such a high basketball IQ that's what he needed to rely on, the defensive end of the floor and knocking down corner threes to get on the court. And now that he is there, with regularity, something he was not in his first 2 seasons. He is able to kind of open that bag and show off a little bit more of his game. But the thing with Grant is he has stayed positive throughout. He is the guy who, I mean, if you do watch my Instagram stories, in the handshake huddle before the start floor, he has a specific, unique handshake with every single starter. He and Jaylen Brown do rock, paper, scissors before every game. He is keeping score. You know, he is a
really
guy
51-6.
I get 9. I think it was 9. I do feel like every time I record it, Grant wins. Right, Jalen's got to change his strategy there.
Apparently.
But I do feel like that's something that maybe has taken time for guys to adjust to, because Grant is not quiet. He talks all the time, but I think that is something that is good and needed with this group inside the room, because as we know, Jayson and Jaylen are not the most vocal guys, boisterous people. And so Grant in there, he also, talking to him preseason, assumed some leadership role. He arranged a dinner for everyone to go to, and he is not afraid to speak up and can also take criticism. I will say, I've seen Ime get mad at Grant for being in the wrong position or screwing something up, and Grant just comes aside and is like, yeah, gotcha, coach. I know. And, I think that that's huge for other players to see. And I know, even though he's not a star of the team, but sitting on the sidelines, we talked about this so much at the beginning of the season, is guys holding each other accountable, coaches holding each other accountable, but then also not getting offended when you do get called out. And I think that is a development that has happened with this group. And you're seeing guys are able to speak freely with one another, and then also be able to learn from that. And I think those are huge steps that are being taken behind the scenes that we probably don't get to see.
I feel like I should start to use that at home. Like if I, don't fill the dishwasher the right way or something, like, I got you, coach. I'm good. Like,
no okay, I'll take you. Should we watch some film? Show me how you want it done, and I will do it. Yes, my husband would do the same. I agree.
Yeah, no, I like that. We should get out of here because it's been, I don't know, almost an hour. I do want to mention very quickly, because I feel like I'd be very off-brand if I didn't do so, that there was a photo taken at All-Star Weekend with Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. They were all in it together. They were all smiling. I feel like
your eyes, Evan.
Yeah,
I know where this is going, so I just need him to hurry up.
Look, I don't know what it means. I don't know if the feud is squashed. I agree with the sentiment that some have mentioned, that I think we'll really find out when KG's number goes into the rafters, if Ray is there or Ray is not there. That's going to be the answer to your question, because Lord knows whatever plans he has. Like, he wasn't there for Paul's because he was golfing that day. Like, he can move whatever he's doing to be there if he wants to be there. So we'll see. I'm not buying in quite yet that the feud is over. Perk, though, love you, Perk. Can't wait to have you back on the show. But the idea that the Celtics should retire Ray Allen's number just to squash the feud is about the dumbest thing Perk has ever said. So I'm not in favor of that. But
take that back. I'm on board with the sentiment.
But yeah, like, you don't just retire somebody's number to, like, improve the vibes. Like, that's not what you do. That's stupid. So we're not doing that. But yes, I love the 08 Celtics as much as anybody else, maybe as much as the players themselves. And I hope that they, get all of this behind them at some point. This has been fun, Abby, as always.
I want to know if Rondo's on board. If Rondo has really, I know KG, right? KG.
I'm going to say no.
I want to know if Rondo's on board. I think that's what it's really going to take to bring that group back together.
Yeah, I doubt it. No time too quick, but hey, we'll see. There's got to be a holdout somewhere, I guess. For Evan, for Abby, go ahead. What's that?
The number retirement is soon for KG.
Real soon, yeah. What's the date on that? 10th, you said?
I was like, it's
it's Dallas game.
Yeah,
it's against Dallas, March 13th. NBC Sports Boston, the only place where you can watch this in its entirety after the game.
It's going to be an emotional day for sure. They're not a dry eye in the house. No question.
Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
I just love the cat rumors that came about after he got his picture taken with everybody. It was like, why is cat in this picture?
The best part of the whole thing was the Minnesota Timberwolves were the ones that put out the video. Here's our star with a bunch of Celtics legends, including the guy who traded our biggest star to Boston. Oh, it's so good. All right, well, this has been a real Jewish goodbye. I think we should.
With those guys, he was there when, wasn't he KG went and he was there for Cat.
Yeah, Cat. They overlapped like 1 or 2 seasons.
Yeah.
That's
true. Yeah, he was something of a mentor for him, for sure.
Those guys. Yeah.
Look, well, I appreciate seeing it. Trust me. I'm a huge Cat fan. I love that guy. That guy rules.
Bring him to Boston. Problem is, you'd have to probably part with Jalen to do it. So
Not doing
that starts the whole debate for another show. All right, bye. See you later.
Thanks for having me.
Subscribe.